Today on SLPT, we're joined by Stacia, a bilingual SLP and private practice owner whose passion for early childhood speech therapy is deeply personal. From her own IEP in middle school to running a brick and mortar practice focused on preschoolers, Stasia's story is one of grit and optimism. Stacia, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Thanks. I'm so excited to have you. Been looking forward to it for a while, so I'm glad that we made this work, and I'm glad to have you on.
Thanks.
Really exciting. Stacia, where are you from?
I'm from Long Island,
New York area, and you're
New York.
based there now as well?
Yeah. So my just opened my practice. We'll get all into that. I'm in Garden City.
Garden City. Okay. So can you share a little bit about how you got into the field?
So I knew I always wanted to do something in education that was a little bit more science based. Um, I never really knew what the field was until I was in undergrad. I went to Syracuse University for undergrad, and then I went to Hofstra University for graduate school. So I just found the way of doing something education, working with kids, but also science based. I really like the research and the clinical side of working with families and being on a team. So that's kind of how I got into being a speech therapist.
Awesome. Awesome. And I know we both have something in common. We both had an IEP when we were younger. Can you talk me through that, how that came about?
Yeah. I was very fortunate enough to go to a very small district on Long Island. I went to the Wheatley School District. So I got a lot of individualized support where it was needed. The academic struggles that I entailed really started in middle school. I think the biggest thing that I learned personally for myself from having an IEP all the way through high school, through college, graduating, graduate school, all the way to becoming a professional, the most important message I feel like I can share, and I feel like we've talked about this already, is being a self advocate. And
Yep.
that's what I feel really strongly about for my own children, and really teaching parents the importance of that, whether that's in an IEP meeting or for their self, whether they're older, of like one of my clients, or even if they're younger, how to self advocate. That's really important because that's a huge part of having an IEP as a student.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned that lesson by watching my parents advocate through me,
Right.
and I think that
Learn from
taught
my
me a
mom.
lot. What now I'm on the other side of the table, um, and it's so important to self-advocate. There's no one else that's gonna do it but you. So learning those skills early, I think, is super invaluable.
Yeah, and if it's not you, it has to be the parent. So a lot of it, especially like in our field now, is parent education of this is what your child's entitled to, this is what they should be getting, this is what X, Y, and Z should be. So really important to teach parents from like a parent perspective of what they should be advocating on based on what their child needs or may not need.
Yeah, very cool. I'm glad that you're doing that type of work because I think it's super important.
Yeah.
Um, there's not enough people looking out for the parents and the children outside of schools, so I'm really glad to hear that. That's awesome. So what led you to choose the preschool population?
So I was knew I always wanted to work with kids. During my CF, I was fortunate enough to do a private practice, and I really feel like I also do. I know this is a little bit off topic of the question, but another thing I'm passionate about is graduate and undergraduate student mentoring. And one of the things that I always tell the students that I'm mentoring is that it's really important to get private practice experience for the sake of, okay, you want to do kids, but is that early intervention? Is that preschool? Is that toddlers? Is that early elementary grades, or is it like you wanna end up at a middle school? And without being, even sometimes if you're at like a larger agency, you don't get that experience because it's very selected by age. If you're at a private practice, it's a little bit more open-ended. So back to my experience when I was at the first private practice that I worked at, I was able to have that experience of my whole caseload throughout the day was a mix of like 1-year-old, 3-year-old, then I had a 7-year-old, then I had a 2-year-old, then I had a 6-year-old. And that variety throughout the day taught me that I love preschool. I love the babies also. I love, like, when I say early intervention, I don't mean that I'm a provider for early intervention. I think that is also, like, sometimes can get confusing, but for 1 to 3-year-olds, that's what I mean by early intervention ages, obviously, and then working with the toddlers, and then I love, like, the occasional 6 to 8-year-olds because I'm like, "Okay, this is amazing. You are, like, a human. You're an adult. You can have a full-blown conversation, and work on obviously different goals." So I do like the mix, but mostly I love the preschools and early intervention kiddos.
Very cool, very cool. What are some pros of working with that age group?
Some pros, I think the biggest pro is that you see so much progress over such a short period of time, regardless of the child, regardless of the age, because so cliche and everyone says it, but like these children really are sponges, right? So it's like you give them a little bit of information, you give them the support they need, you take that support away, and how can you see them implement that on their own, right? So I think that's one of the most rewarding pros is seeing all the progress that they can make because they're sponges. And also at this age, their parents are very eager to get them either like quote unquote caught up or caught up to what they should be doing or more advanced or whatever case may be. But it's also so nice then to work with the parents at that age to get them to be like a cohesive team essentially.
Right. So how are you going about doing that? How are you working with the parents to form
I
that
do a lot of parent education within the session and also outside of the session. So, what that looks like for me, and that makes my practice very unique, is that we use communication notebooks. And after the session, I'll write every single thing that the child did with support, without support, areas of strength, areas of concern, how they can specifically practice that at home. And it's not being sent home with a worksheet because for a lot of our families, that's not realistic, right? They already have a million activities. These kids are overscheduled already after the afternoons, after school. They're not sitting down to do another speech homework. They're just not. I just don't think it's realistic. And for some families, it works. But for a lot of them, it's like, okay, maybe speech is at the bottom of the list, which again, not talking for all families, obviously. So something that we do in our notebooks is like quick, realistic, functional tips and ways that they can support their children at home. One of my favorite examples that I always tell parents is like the bathroom mirror trick. For example, if they're like a speech or a language kid, or if they're working on fluency or whatever their goals are, they'll take a post-it, they'll put it on the bathroom mirror, regardless of how old they are, right? It like kind of works for everybody. At least children are exposed to brushing their teeth twice a day so they can practice twice a day. You get it out of the way. You need a few minutes of practice every day versus a worksheet, maybe whenever they are able to get it into their schedule, because that's what's going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I like meeting the kid where they are, and during those routine periods, it's so hard to give a kid a worksheet and then say, "Hey, complete this." They not only have to manage their time efficiently to complete it, then they also have to sit down and do the work independently. Now they're in a situation where their parents already helping them brush their teeth, um, whatever it is.
It's realistic, right? It's functional. So whether that's like playing I Spy in the car, whether that's doing like the bathroom mirror we said, whether it's like highlighting words for an older kid if they're doing their math homework, circling and highlighting the R's that they're working on in speech, and then going back doing the math homework, and then going back and using that math worksheet as speech homework. So functional. That's like the biggest way that we teach our parents. Going kind of back to your question, back to parent education of like this is how we can help our children realistically.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. I think we can dive a little bit more into your private practice specifically.
Yeah.
What does your location look like? What's your setup? What's
So I'm
your
so excited. We just opened 4th July weekend. We're in Garden City. We are thank you. I'm so excited. It's like so surreal. I definitely miss having coworkers. And I feel like I always tell people that who also have private practices because you're kind of just talking to the kids and the parents all day, which is amazing, but pros and cons for sure. The clients that we see are through Nassau County's preschool program, which is CPSC. Um, it's for ages 3 to 5 who are deemed eligible by the school district. And then if they're not eligible, that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need speech, or maybe they're getting speech in school, but they can come to us supplementally for private services. So
really
it's
cool?
great.
And are these all individual sessions? Are these group sessions?
Yeah, we do all individual sessions. They're 30 minutes. And then from the evaluation, we do long-term and short-term goals, not just for the child, but also for the parent, of how they can meet that support to help those children. And then, as I said before, we do like the mentoring for the graduate students. And then the other thing that we do that's like groups would be like sensory speech classes. We do that for speech and language enrichment for play, basically, for like the babies, the 1 to 3 or the 3 to 5 year olds.
Yeah,
So a
awesome.
lot.
I love that you mentioned play.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about play and its purpose with
Yeah.
speech therapy?
So a lot of the times I think in the beginning, parents who've never had experience with like speech or anything like that they think is going to be structured, they walk in and they just see that I'm playing with their kid for 30 minutes and they're like, wait, what did you actually work on? Right. It's like
Yeah.
you look like you're playing Play-Doh, you look like you're doing farm, like it's like a toy store in here, right? So children learn through play, right? So I think that's like one of the important things to emphasize is that yes, worksheets and structured things work for children, but there's also different types of play, right? So there's like structured play, there's unstructured play, there's open-ended play, imaginative play. I mean, you know this, right? So it's like what play looks like for every child is different. One thing that we emphasize in our practice is play from a sensory and movement perspective, right? So company name, Move, Play, Say, because movement is evidence-based that it works, right? When you have children moving and playing and doing things, it teaches them so many different skills aside from speech and language that they're working on. It teaches problem solving, sensory regulation, emotional regulation, critical thinking, right? There's so much research to back not only how play helps speech and language, but also for how movement helps speech relative to play.
Right. I totally agree. And it can be a very engaging time where the child's mind is really turned on and really
Mhm.
focused on a game.
Yeah,
Whether
and, like, we really follow their lead, right? So I'm not gonna, like, push them to play farm if they're obsessed with dinosaurs because I'm gonna get so much more not only spontaneous speech and language, but also, like, structured trials that we're working on to meet their goals if it's something that they're more engaged in versus, "Okay, let's play with the farm because this is what I chose and this is what I planned for." No, it just doesn't work like that, especially when they're this little.
I totally agree. And I hope a lot of people hear that initiative and push more towards that. Because I think that's really where the true learning takes place in those types of settings. So thank you for doing that. That's really cool. Going off of that, what are some of the values that drive the way you've designed your services?
Part of our mission is speech, language, and feeding. Those are the 3 areas that we treat, and that's another thing. I know from, like, my personal experience, parents are like, "Wait, what do you mean you do feeding? Like, what is that?" I thought feeding was for, like, someone that had a stroke, or I thought feeding was for someone that, like, was in a car accident. You associate I think in general, people associate feeding therapy or swallowing therapy with adults, not children that are just stuck on eating dinosaurs from a specific store, dinosaur chicken nuggets, right, from a specific store. So part of our mission is really a whole child approach to look at the child as a whole, to meet them where they're at, give them the support they need, and more importantly, not just to give them the support they need with me in physically my office, but with their sibling, with their parent, at school, at gymnastics, at karate, right? We want them to generalize to school and beyond. That's really important because, yeah, it's great if like black and white on paper they're meeting their goals, but we want them to learn it and then implement it to the real world.
I love it. I love the state that your practice is in right now. I love your values and your goals and the way that you're incorporating the families and the whole child approach. It's really, really cool. Stacia, what are some different ways that you go about getting new clients?
So in the beginning, everyone said to us that we had networked with, whether it was other providers in the field of speech therapy or related services or not, whether it was other small businesses, word of mouth. To me, I never really knew what that meant because it didn't feel like I was getting clients by word of mouth. So it was a very like abstract, okay, yeah, word of mouth, but like who am I telling? Who are these people that
Who's
are
now?
like,
What
who's
word?
now? Who's now? So it wasn't until a few years later that I feel like what clicked for me was I felt like telling anyone and everyone that I'm a speech therapist and I just opened, and that's what word of mouth becomes, right? Because if I'm getting my nails done and I hear mom talking next to me and X, Y, and Z is happening. And I like name drop kind of like that I'm a speech therapist. She's like, oh my God, no way. My neighbor needs a speech therapist. And that's what word of mouth is. Or it's telling someone else that I'm accepting new clients and then that person circles back to me, right? So it's like always putting your name out there and promoting yourself and just telling people what you do really is what word of mouth is until it fully circles back. But I really think that a lot of that part takes time because in the beginning, everyone's like, oh, yeah, it's word of mouth, it's word of mouth. But like, again, we said, what is that? What
Yeah.
is mouth? Right. So it's
Yeah.
like telling everybody and really promoting as much as you can in every opportunity that you can, because you don't know who the person next to you is. Aside from that, social media is a big one to get new clients, just networking in general, social media. I
Yeah,
really
I
go ahead.
love the word of mouth because I think for myself, when I think about when I'm looking to get whatever type of service, whatever type of referral I need, I'm so much more likely to ask a friend and really trust the advice of a friend rather than look up things online and read other people's reviews that I don't know. So I think it's so powerful word of mouth because of that component of I trust my friend is telling me this. Now I inherently trust this more than I would.
Right.
So
As a private practice owner, starting really important to remember to keep a face to your brand. So people know me and associate it with my brand. So if I'm talking to someone and they've met me, they're more willing, and I think they're more able, I guess, to say, okay, well, I met this person. She's great, X, Y, and Z. You should use her for speech therapy. Right. So it's like, because there's like a physical name, not just like a business and you should like call this person and sign up. It's not just like giving your phone number and business card and social media handle to people, but it's knowing that there's like a face behind the company makes it a lot more personal, because that's what our services are. They're personal, they're individualized. We're not huge factory agency kind of turning of clients. We genuinely care and we want the most individualized support to provide these boutique style services to get these kids the most tailored, individualized support that they need.
I think that's great advice for a new SLP that's maybe looking to start their own private practice. What's one thing that you wish you knew while starting your own private practice?
Totally. I feel like private practice was always something that was brushed over in graduate school. And I know this from like other experience, regardless of what schools anybody went to. It's never quote unquote like taught to you, because it's like, oh, private practice, you have to have an office. No, that's fully not what a private practice means. Private practice means that you're legally covered and it's having a client, right? And that one client becomes two clients. Like, yeah, you technically can say you have a private practice, right? As long as obviously this isn't legal or financial advice, but if what you're doing abides by the state and wherever you live and ASHA, right? Um, if you have one client, you technically can say that you have a private practice. So I think to future students or other people that are like, okay, I want to start a practice, I need an office. No, you really shouldn't start with that, right? Because it's a big responsibility. You're not going to have all these clients walk through the door. And if you're able to do that, that's a different conversation. But I think just starting off small, but you can still say that you have a private practice. And that's how I think the best way is to start, just with a few clients.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, on the side, on the weekends,
Yeah,
I've spoken to some other guests about different ways that they've started, and they all kind of have the same type of sentiment that you just said. If you have one client that you work with on the side, you technically do have a private practice, uh, and you're off to a good start. So I think starting small and not jumping at the brick and mortar initially is something that I've heard a few times. So
Thanks for listening to part one. Continue for part two.